Welcome to Rockwall Inn, where you'll get the best food and drink in New York City. My name is Amy, and I'll be your bartender today. Sorry, sir, we don't serve alcohol to minors.
I'm not here to get served alcohol. I'm here to get a good education. I'm doing a school project on the sexual revolution from the 60s and 70s. I heard before you were a bartender, you were a historian.
Am a historian? I did do research on the subject. What do you need, buckaroo?
Alright, so first on the checklist, what is free love?
Can't you search this stuff up?
Oral history's fun.
Can't argue with that. Do you have any specific questions?
Not really.
Alright then. So, free love, simply put, was love with no commitment. People didn't like getting tied down, you know? It didn't represent anything like an overhaul of the legal marriage system or anything, no orgies either. It just concerned the right to love as many or as little people as you wanted. Celibacy, polygamy, complex marriage, stuff that the Christian church didn't approve of, all represented free love. Even adultery was to remain within the concerns of those involved and not the church or court. Anyways, this free love movement was seen as a socialist endeavor, and so the government wanted to stop that because not democracy. They tried to prevent free love by making laws about the regulation of divorce, preventing unmarried couples from living together, and prohibiting same-sex marriage.
Is that why relationships are so messy now? No wonder I can't get a girlfriend, man.
Or boyfriend, but that's not my problem. I'm just Wikipedia, apparently.
Okay, alright. So, what about that Summer of Love thing? That sounds pretty cool.
The Summer of Love was an event in 1967. Some hippies gathered in San Francisco and partook in music, recreational drugs, and free love. It was all about peace, love, and freedom of expression. It was also part of the counterculture movement. Cool how things intertwine, huh?
Yeah.
What else is on the checklist?
What were the Stonewall riots?
Riots at Stonewall Inn.
Bruh.
Alright. So back in the 1960s, people didn't appreciate the fact that love was love. The police constantly harassed LGBT people, especially at bars. Places selling liquor could actually be shut down if they were accused of serving LGBT patrons. If you remember the sit-ins from the civil rights movement, the LGBT community did something similar called a sip-in. They'd sit down, announce their sexuality, and then sue any establishments that refused to serve them. Still, gay bars were a refuge, a place to be comfortable with who you were. The mafia took notice of this and started selling liquor to them without a license, purely for the profit, of course. If the police tried to raid the bar, it would already be evacuated because the mafia had people on the inside.
Alright. What about Stonewall? Why is it so special?
I was getting to that. So, Stonewall was actually a straight bar.
But why is it in the center of the LGBT movement then?
Bro, you gotta stop interrupting. It was bought, renovated, and rebranded as a gay bar by the Genovese crime family that had control over Greenwich Village, New York. It was a very welcoming place. They accepted drag queens, runaways, and even the homeless. It was also one of the last, if not the only bar that allowed dancing.
That sounds great, but...
Remember how corrupt police officers would warn the mafia about raids against their gay bars? Yeah, well that didn't happen on June 28th, 1969. 13 people were arrested. But, this was a common occurrence, right? But the anger had built up, and the LGBT community retaliated. Angry patrons and people around the neighborhood were upset by this injustice, and stuck around to surround the police raid. The riot began when a lesbian was hit over the head while an officer forced her into a police van. Stones, pennies, bottles, anything within reach really was thrown at the police. The violence became too much for them, so the authorities barricaded themselves within the bar. In the fashion of the riot, they actually set the location on fire, since they couldn't break the barricade.
Yay!
Indeed. That protest lasted for 6 days. While this wasn't considered the start of the movement, it was a pretty huge catalyst. It's actually where June became Pride Month. They hold the Gay Pride Parade on the anniversary of Stonewall. Oh, stay here. It's my break. You can watch this birth control commercial from the 60s. I thought it was interesting.
Whoa, what a coincidence. That's also my checklist. You know, my throat is getting really dry from all this talking. Do you think you could...
I'm not serving you alcohol.
I wasn't gonna ask for that.
Take some apple cider.
Deal.
It's not hard. Oh, whatever. Commercial break. I'll compile some legal details for your...
School presentation.
Right.
Looking for a new birth control method in this era of the 1970s? This is Enovit, the first ever birth control pill in the United States that was approved by the FDA. Now that women have more control over their biological processes, they can focus on themselves more, like college and career paths. The government is so helpful, they even devised the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. This organization has gone on to provide STD testing and treatment, birth control, and fertility services, and all of the things included in general health care. Other forms of birth control include intrauterine devices made of copper that were invented way back in the 1960s. This is a pretty popular form of contraception nowadays, but many people still take day-to-day pills that were made by Gregory Pincus and John Rock. Remember, not all contraceptives are 100% foolproof, so make sure to stay safe and use protection.
Okay, I'm back, and I got some legal history for... Where'd you get that?
It was on the counter.
You know what? This is a good segue. Do you know what the freedom of expression is?
Well, yeah, it's in the Bill of Rights, right?
In this case, it's actually about the stuff you're reading.
Boobs?
Close enough. Freedom of expression was fought over during the 1960s and 70s. It was a very conservative time back then, if you know what I mean. There are a few court cases you should be aware of. In Redrup versus New York, Robert Redrup was a newsstand clerk who sold sexually explicit books. An undercover officer purchased 2 sex novels and then convicted the clerk of selling obscene material, which was against New York penal law. But because they could not clearly define obscenity, Redrup won. And then in Miller v. California and the Paris Adult Theater versus Slayton, the Supreme Court declared that in order to find anything obscene, the court must conclude that the average person would find that work appeals to sexual interests, depicts sexual conduct in an offensive manner, or prove it didn't serve any real purpose besides arousal.
I see.
Is that all the info you needed?
Nah, there's one more thing. Harvey Milk and the Twinkie defense? Ah?
He's the guy on the wall over there. I think he's pretty important.
Why so?
So, Harvey Milk was a human rights leader. He was the first openly gay official in the US with a position on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. He was loud and unapologetic about himself and his sexuality. It was Milk's mission to protect gay rights. His base of operations was the Castro, San Francisco, where he created the first LGBT union. Milk's leadership in his city made it an example for other LGBT communities.
Isn't the mayor supposed to lead the city, though?
He was close to the mayor, Dan White. Together, they boosted Milk's political career until he was selected to join the Board of Advisors. Milk spoke out on state and national issues regarding demographics such as the LGBT community, women, and racial and ethnic minorities. But he wasn't elected just based on his activism. Milk was also an advocate for a higher standard of living. He built daycares for working mothers, sought to create safe neighborhoods, and worked to improve public services such as libraries.
Dang, he sounds pretty important. But what sets him apart from other activists?
The Twinkie defense.
Naughty.
Due to the way of thinking during that time, Milk received death threats daily. He was so prepared for what could happen that he actually had several recordings of his will, including one if he had been assassinated.
No way.
Yes, way. After a year in office, Harvey Milk and his friend Dan White were assassinated. What makes it worse is that the killer was acquitted because he was too bloated to think straight. He was in prison for less than 8 years. Milk's death was pretty impactful. After the trial of the assassin, the White Night riots began, and destruction was rampant. People set fire to police cars and raided City Hall, and police raided Castro and vandalized gay businesses out of spite and hate.
Coolio. Alright. Anyway, I also needed some help with...
Okay, closing time! Everyone out!
Wait, but I still need...
We're closed! Come back tomorrow! Hope you get an A!